nice sunny morning, 41 degrees, I think, depending on where you live. We had a really nice outing yesterday with our widows group at the Reeves Mansion. Fantastic tour guide. And you know, I've been through that mansion before, but I don't know, every time I go through it, I'm just fascinated by what's there. 17 rooms, and it's not as big as the mansion in Millersburg, but I mean, it's well worth it. It really is.
Did you notice your packet? The day, I think it was on the top floor, one on the floor, there was 2 different levels.
Yeah, on the ballroom is the 3rd floor.
But the deal is that the people that work for them was a level below.
Yes.
That's the way they look at it.
Yeah, going into the maid's room, you had to step down.
Yeah.
You had to step down. And in the ladies' tea room, there is a small potty, and then there is the master bathroom. The guests would always use the small potty. The master bathroom is where it would go into the master bedroom. And I didn't know that Mr. Reeves died there. So I would imagine, oh, that's a good thing for your ghost tours. Yeah. So, thank you for joining us. Hope you got a brochure or whatever, a paper for this morning. And holy smokes, I don't know what happened to my. All right, well, I'll fix it out. Anyway, let's see, who can I pick on this morning? Hey, Buster, would you mind leading us in a prayer before we get into class?
Dear God, we come before you this time, thanking you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity to be here. We pray now that you give Joe ready recollection of what he studied, and how he can present it to all of us. It's in your son's name we pray.
Amen. Thank you. All right, what did I do with it? Oh, here it is. Okay. Belshazzar's demise and the fall of Babylon. All right, so first a couple of review questions. What did this great tree provide? Shade. Okay. Food. Protection. Provision. Shelter.
Bunch of leaves.
A bunch of leaves. Wait a minute. Fuel for a fire. Leaves, twigs. Yeah. All right. Now, compare that to the king. What does the king provide?
Protection.
Just about all of the above. Pretty much. Okay. So then we go to this one. What did the stump provide?
Nothing.
No. Firewood. That's it. Everything's gone. All right. So the lesson here, lesson learned. All right. And I think we talked about this last week. And remember, the tree is the king. And this stump is what happened to the king because he had it all taken away from him. And the lesson learned is that forever humble, because what God gives, he can also take. And we get that from Job. The Lord gives, the Lord takes. Blessed be the name of the Lord. If we win, we praise the Lord. If we lose, we praise the Lord. All right, so that is King Nebuchadnezzar's lesson on humility, which he didn't have any at that time. How was mankind reduced to being beasts? And we talked about this last week. Okay, so these are attributes that, what is it?
Pride,
Yeah, wait a minute. I gotta hit the right button.
arrogance,
Yeah.
Rebellion,
Yeah. Making themselves and their,
power,
yeah,
God.
yep, into a god. And that's the problem that you get into. And we talked about, can we think of anybody in our lifetime or in the generation before us who were like this? And we came up with several. And most of those people were dictators, okay? We see it, Hitler, gone. Stalin, gone. Although he's gone, the country was there, but Russia, it fell, and now it's doing whatever it's doing. We've seen wicked rulers come and go. Saddam, Gaddafi, they're gone. So when they make themselves their own God, who puts people into power? God does. We read about that, I want to say Romans, but it could be somewhere else. All right, Daniel chapter 5. We're going to read this one. Let's see, who can I pick on? Let's see. Hey, Brad, you've done presentations before. How about reading chapter 5? I hope there's no hard.
I know how to read.
I hope there's no hard words in there for you, and if they are, we'll just let you muddle through.
Was it chapter 5?
Yeah.
Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold, and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the clyster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. And the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake, and said to the wise men of Babylon, Whosoever shall read this writing, and show me the interpretation thereof, shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. Actually, no, what that word is. Alright, verse 10. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in the kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of thy father light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar thy father, the king, I say, thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams, and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? have even heard thee, that the Spirit of the God is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing, and make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But they could not show the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of thee, that thou canst make the interpretation and dissolve doubts. Now if thou canst read the writing, and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold around thy neck, and shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. That I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slew, and whom he would, he kept alive. And whom he would, he set up, and whom he would, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from the kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whosoever he will. And thou, O son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though he knewest all this, but hast lifted thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine with them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, and of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, tekel, upharsin.
Good.
This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighing in the balances and art found wanting. Paris, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold around his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. And that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old.
Okay. Wait a minute. I just missed something. So, wait a minute. So Darius the Mede received the kingdom at about the age of, okay. Darius received it. Okay. So, according to historical timelines, approximately how long after Nebuchadnezzar II is restored to power did Belshazzar take the throne? Now, I think the question is ambiguous because in order for it to be a little bit more accurate, after Nebuchadnezzar died, I think, instead of after he was returned to power. After he died, how long did it take for Belshazzar to take the throne? Here's your options. 5, 7, 13, 20.
13.
13 years. Okay, and we're gonna look at this. Now there's a whole lot going on in the reading as well. And one of the questions,
I
what's
have a
it?
question.
Yeah,
There were many Nebuchadnezzars.
right.
So, I don't know, David might be able to answer this. Was there more than one Nebuchadnezzar at this time?
Well, he was Nebuchadnezzar II.
Yeah, but there was others.
There was another one, but
I don't know.
the kingdom of Babylon lasted for quite a while, or the city, the ruler, king. Nebuchadnezzar, I think, and I could be totally wrong here, but the sometimes they would give the name of the king, but the interpretation of the word of that name is king or ruler. Now, I could be wrong with Nebuchadnezzar because there was another one. But this was the second one, and this was the one, the predominant one. And if you remember, well, most of these are all Chaldeans, where Abram came from. And a lot of historians call these Akkadians. They were Akkadians. Now, when Steve Turner was here, he was really big into that realm. But yeah, because they talk about a lot of the stuff, the thing of Gilgamesh and all that other business. But if you see here, it didn't take very long. Nebuchadnezzar he's died, and this happens, and I've got a slide here. It gets really busy, but it'll help. Let's explore that timeline. Okay, so history. Let me look here and see if I've, okay. It might be there. Let's see. All right, so you have Nebuchadnezzar. He ruled for approximately 43 years, from 605 to 562 BC. When he died, his son, and it wasn't his oldest son, his son, Amel-Marduk, took over from 562 to 560. Now, Marduk is a name of one of their gods, one of their chief gods. And so you'll see that name show up again later on in the genealogy. So Amel-Marduk, as he succeeded him, he actually released Jeconiah after 37-year imprisonment. Jeconiah was the last king of Israel who was taken captive. And because of that, in 2 Kings 26, 27 through 30, he's allowed to sit at the king's table now. Okay, so he frees Jeconiah. 37 years. Now, what was the prophecy about the Israelites? How long were they going to be in captivity? 70 years. Yeah. All right, so now we're at, 37 years. All right. Well, the 43 years, I guess. I don't know. I think maybe 41 years because it depends on, we have to go back and look at the siege of Jerusalem when they were taken captive, when that first group. There was actually 3 exoduses with Babylon to exile with Judah. All right, after Amel-Marduk, Neriglissar becomes king. Now this is interesting because this guy was the son-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar II. He was also one of Nebuchadnezzar's generals, and he married Nebuchadnezzar's daughter, Kashashiah. All right, so now he's in the family. Which, if that's correct, what does that make him with Amel-Marduk, if he's the son-in-law? Amel-Marduk is the son. Yeah, he's a brother-in-law. All right, so interesting to note that he usurps the throne. You notice, how many years did Amel-Marduk reign? 2. All right, so what he does, he orchestrates and has Amel-Marduk assassinated. All right, and he takes over the throne. He did it because of family discord. He didn't feel that Amel-Marduk conducted himself correctly, and he was of the wrong lineage because of who his mother was. So he takes over the throne from 560 to 556 BC. All right. His son is Labishi Marduk. Labishi sounds like something you'd make, like spaghetti or something. But anyway, this was the child king. And Neriglissar just died after 4 years. He just died. So his son took over in 556 BC. Interesting to note, he only reigned anywhere from 1 to 9 months. And he was actually, it was his evil ways. They didn't like what he was doing. But he was a child king. I don't know how old he was. I couldn't find that information. He was assassinated by none other than Belshazzar, who was the son of Nabonidus. Okay? Nabonidus ruled from 556 to 539. So Belshazzar killed the child king so his dad could go into power. All right? So Nabonidus takes over the throne and he rules for 17 years, but he rules in absentia. He's hardly in Babylon. He's out doing other things, even out of the country. He's in the kingdom of Babylon, but he's somewhere else. So what he does, he sets his son up, Belshazzar, as the regent king. Belshazzar is his eldest son. He is a co-regent, so he's actually the king. But if you were historically, you would say that Nabonidus was the last king of Babylon. So Belshazzar rules from 556 to 539. Again, a period of 17 years. And actually, that should be Darius. But Cyrus the Great, it says here in the scripture, the Medo-Persians were taking over, which is true. Cyrus the Great was the king. Darius is who ruled in Babylon. You can't get the two mixed up because they're in allegiance together. But Darius is the one that killed Belshazzar that night. And as a result, when they got Nabonidus, he was exiled. He was not killed, but he was exiled. They got rid of the king. All right, let's see. Do I have anything else on that slide? Really interesting stuff.
Could you repeat the last couple of bits that you just said about Darius and Belshazzar?
Darius, he was a Persian, I think. I think he was a Persian. Darius was in allegiance with Cyrus. In other words, Cyrus the Great was Darius's superior. Okay? Remember, when we get into chapter 6, Darius, I think, is the king who had to put Daniel in the lion's den because he was tricked. And so, when you're reading this, and you're thinking, wait a minute, where did Cyrus come in? Was he before or after? No, they were at the same time together. Okay, that's what I found out through my research. All right, so
how was Darius in connection with Belshazzar again?
he had him killed.
Okay.
Yeah, whether it was him or his men. Now, the way they did this, the Euphrates River was used as a, for lack of a better term, moat or protection around Babylon. The Persians, the Medes and the Persians, found a way to get into the city through the canal of the Euphrates River by blocking it and getting under the gates and into the city. So while Belshazzar is having this drunken party with these 1,000 nobles and using the emblems, the goblets, etc., of the temple and honoring all of Babylon's gods, these guys are coming in. And so it happens, okay? That night it happens. And God, he warned him, he told him. Any other questions? Because when you're reading this account, you're wondering, well, how does this play out? Did somebody assassinate him? Or, well, it was the army, the army of the Medes and Persians that came in and took over. And so Babylon falls. I think this is on the bottom of your page. And it gives you some scripture references so that you could look at it with what Jeremiah had said. Now, Jeremiah was one of the main prophets that talked about all the things that were going to happen to Babylon. And right after, and we'll see this probably, if not in chapter 6, chapter 7, where the Israelites are free to go back because of the way the Persians were. But one of the questions here was, from Nebuchadnezzar to Belshazzar, there was approximately 6 years difference. And I'm thinking of 562 to 556. All right, and that's when Nebuchadnezzar died and when Belshazzar took over. 6 years. That's not a very long time. And then when Belshazzar called on Daniel, there was 23 years. Because, remember, he sees the writing on the wall, and he's terrified, and he doesn't know what to do. And so, I think, where does it say here? Something about, he called all the magicians. He called all the magicians and everybody, and nobody could interpret it. And then the queen entered the banquet hall. This is in verse 10. Because of the words of the king and his nobles, and the queen spoke and said, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts alarm you, or your face be pale. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is a spirit of the holy gods, and in the holy days of your father, illumination, insight, and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And so they find out it's Daniel. So he calls on Daniel. But when we go back to this slide, how is Belshazzar connected to Nebuchadnezzar? It says it's his father or it's his son. How is that? Because you see how this goes. Nabonidus was, actually, he married another daughter of Nebuchadnezzar. And Belshazzar is the eldest son of Nabonidus.
Something I read was that the father could be a ancestor or predecessor.
Okay. Some of the historians say it's actually his grandfather.
Yeah.
And if you're related in some way, you're still called a son. And so it was actually his grandfather.
And the one article I read too was it said the queen mother was actually the mother because she was old enough to remember what Daniel had.
Yes, exactly. So that time, but some people still knew it, but Belshazzar, he did what he wanted to do. He was narcissistic, he was hedonistic, and so he just did it. Now, I don't know if Nabonidus was out trying to get other countries involved, but it doesn't sound like, historically, it doesn't sound that he was doing that. But anyway, Belshazzar Nabonidus was the king in absentia, whereas Belshazzar was the king there. And so when you read the scriptures, you read it, and then the next thing you know, you're in, Nebuchadnezzar. He's struck down with this beast, and then he humbles himself. He gets back his throne, but we don't know. Well, 7 years. We don't know who took over the throne while he was incapacitated. I couldn't find any information. Somebody ran the country. And then here shows up all these guys. And you can see how many were killed. We have 1, 2. We have 2 killed, and then the last one he was killed too. 2 assassinated and 1 killed. All right. Okay. Okay, we'll get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of. We just answered that one, didn't we? How was Belshazzar Nebuchadnezzar's son? And I didn't have this on your paper, but Nebuchadnezzar, he died in 562 BC. His daughter was Nitocris, and she's the one that was married to Nabonidus, a noble. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar's son and grandson were both murdered at the hands of Nabonidus' son, Belshazzar. There it is. I see down here on the bottom a co-rule from 553 to 539. Nabonidus was 556 to 539. There was so much information there. It was, your head would spin after an hour or two of trying to figure it out. All right, key takeaways with the story of Belshazzar. Key takeaways. God's judgment is inevitable. Okay? Especially those flaunting their power and disregarding his authority. All proud leaders will fall. Another one. Pride and arrogance have no place in God's presence. Belshazzar's reckless celebration with the sacred vessels from Jerusalem's temple demonstrates his extreme pride and disregard for God. And number 3, accountability for actions. We are to be mindful of our actions and choices, understanding that there are consequences for our behavior, especially when we disregard God's laws. It was true back then, and it is true today. Terry.
You know, to me, it looks like God allowed them to have the vessels until they used it in these drunken ceremonies.
You don't hear Nebuchadnezzar or any of the other kings doing that. Just this one. Because these were all golden vessels. Number 4. We are to remain humble before God, recognizing our dependence on God and avoiding pride in our achievements is crucial. There's a couple of shows that I've watched where the enemy was vanquished and the heroes, like the general or whatever, says, don't gloat. Don't gloat. There was another movie. One of the things that I know of with the military, as far as submariners go, even though you have an enemy and you sink that enemy sub, there's no rejoicing, because that submariner is actually considered, even though he's your enemy, he's a brother. Terry.
You know, it's like the Republicans did a clean sweep by about an inch. So if you slip, you're going the other way.
Yeah. Yeah, don't gloat. Just don't gloat. And number 5, heeding God's warnings. What warnings does he give us in this day and age? Is there any warnings?
The warnings for us is to continue on, and the other part is we have to believe in the Lord and follow the Lord.
Right.
That's the
Yeah, he tells us
Trust
exactly.
God and keep his commandments.
What's that?
Trust God and keep his commandments.
Yeah. What? Okay. And that leads into this one. Solomon. He wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, which is also a good book, but somewhat depressing. At the conclusion of the matter,
All is vanity.
okay, and what are we to do?
Fear God and keep his commandments.
That's it. The whole duty of man is to fear God and to keep his commandments. Now, these guys are Gentiles, and you know, they're not subject to the laws of Israel. They have their own gods. And yet Daniel, he obeyed what he could. All right, we're going to see more of that here. Let's see if I have something else here. Okay, heeding God's warning, pay attention to the signs in our lives and making necessary changes when we see potential danger or moral decline. Oh, I'm going to go back. I don't want that. All right. So there's a couple other questions I think I didn't answer.
Joe,
Yeah.
we have to keep the law of Christ, but we have to recognize that's not what saves us. Because if we think what we're doing,
Oh, yeah.
and we're in the wrong boat.
Yeah. Was there, I think there's another set of questions here somewhere. Oh, okay. Why didn't Daniel, or why didn't Belshazzar, well, let me ask this. Did Belshazzar know who Nebuchadnezzar was? Do I have that up there? I may have had that question and I got rid of it.
Yes, he knew.
Yeah, number 9. Yeah, he knew. He should have, since it was his grandfather. And he should have known some of the history behind his grandfather, what happened. All right? So, why didn't he know who Daniel was? Belshazzar had no idea about Daniel. By this time, let me see, Daniel was,
10 years.
yeah, about 20 years or so. Daniel was anywhere from 15 to 17 when he was taken into captivity. Okay, so now 43 years have passed. So that would make him, if he was 17, that would make him in his 60s. Okay. When Daniel's thrown in the lion's den, he's a lot older. And we're going to look at that next week. But now he's becoming an old man. You don't hear about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego after their fiery furnace ordeal. So, questions, comments? I tended to look at this particular lesson from the historical part, because when I read chapter 4 and then read chapter 5, something didn't seem to mesh right, because it seems like, man, this happened real quick. But there was a time lapse in between the two. And you know, the Bible doesn't say that, but archaeology has confirmed this through the tablets that they found. They found conical tablets with writing on it, well, emblems, and that's how they were able to decipher a lot of this information. And what it's telling us is the same thing that the Bible has told us about these individuals. So, next week, Daniel goes to the lions. Questions, posers, comments? Yeah.
I may be wrong here. I'm just trying to think of something I've heard before. But chronologically, I think I did a chronological read one time, and I think they put chapters 7 and 8 before 5 and 6. I think. I could be wrong though.
Well, I know right now, as far as the language goes, this is all Aramaic. In chapter 8 through 12 is Hebrew, because that deals with Daniel's dreams.
But then they talk about Daniel's prayer, which is coming up. That would say that it was before he went into the lion's den, if it was what Brad said.
It would be. His prayer was before he went into the lion's den. Because that's what they accused him of. Now, we're gonna explore a little bit. Well, why did these guys accuse Daniel? What was his position according to Nebuchadnezzar? What did Nebuchadnezzar give him as a position?
Third command, the one time.
Yeah, I mean, he was over all the magicians and everybody, the wise men. He was over all of them. So next week we're going to find out what happened here. I think there's a problem with jealousy once again. Okay. Yeah. So, and that's why you know the Chaldeans accused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because they embarrassed or humiliated, or Daniel did, humiliated them before the king. One, they wouldn't violate their dietary laws. They ate vegetables, and they were more healthier than anybody. Two, they wouldn't bow down. And so, you know, the Chaldeans couldn't interpret, they couldn't interpret the dream. That was the other one. And here comes Daniel, he interprets the dream. And then Daniel interprets another dream with the tree. And they didn't want to interpret it because they couldn't or they were afraid to. And so now we have Belshazzar killed, murdered, and Babylon falls.
Wouldn't you think they'd want to buddy up to him, knowing that he knows all this stuff and he's related to the...
Well, that would be common sense, but I don't think they were very wise in that decision.
I think they knew that God was with him, though, because they said that several times.
Yeah,
This man, he knows.
yeah. But they didn't want to acknowledge it because of pride. Pride is the big one. And I think as we read through Daniel, we're going to see that pride is the big key. And we're kind of, all of us are kind of guilty of that to a certain extent. Now, one of the things, and I thought about this, in the workforce, you're an expert in what you do, all right? And people use you as a resource. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with being proud of what you do. But there's a line. You don't want to cross that line. Okay? And these two kings actually did that. They crossed the line, and they actually made themselves into a god. One of the doctors that I closely associated with in the Undersea and Hyperbaric Medical Society was based out of Toledo, and Dr. Feldmeyer, who was written, published, and I talked to him and I said, he goes, I'm just a lowly servant. That's it. That's all he said. And I remember that. Because there's nothing special here. I just do what I do, and I'm just a lowly servant. I'll get you the other part here in a second. Thank you for your attention.